Hi there, I'm Eli Sipka, and this is the Apatros Review. Now, in this episode, we take a look at an old, about almost 49-year-old proto slasher, which was originally called The Captive Female, then retitled Matthew, named after its psycho, and then in Germany as Claw of Terror. But the common English title for this film is Scream Bloody Murder. Now, this film was an American film, theatrical, of course, and had its premiere in El Paso, Texas on the 28th of December 1972. So about towards the end of this month, this film will be 49 years old. Next year, and the next year will be 50 years old. And it had its general release around the US in February 1973. It then saw in West Germany premiere in the 21st of December 1973. It was directed and produced by Mark B. Ray, who also wrote the screenplay along with Larry Alexander. And I should mention that the film was presented by a certain man named Alan Roberts, who made a whole bunch of schlocky films in his career and gained infamy about around a decade ago for a certain movie about a certain religion. I'll let you guys figure that one out because I don't want to mention it here. Now for this film. A young boy named Matthew one day decides to give in to his darkness and kills his father by running him over with a bulldozer while they're out on the farm. But Lady Karma is watching and causes the boy to fall off the bulldozer, his hand being mangled by the process. Taken by the nuns to live in an asylum for the next few years, Matthew has his useless hand replaced by a hook, and his anger and misogynistic feelings only grew. Nice work, you nuns. After being let go from the asylum, Matthew returns home to find his mother is remarried. Again, Matthew lets the darkness take over and he kills his mother and stepfather before going on a trip through the countryside, killing anyone who offends his incel tendencies. He settles on Vera, a hooker who has a strong resemblance to his late mother. Should be, since Vera and Matthew's mother played by the same actress. Interesting piece of casting. Making her life hell by killing her Johns and trapping her inside the mansion he had commandeered by slaughtering its original inhabitants, forcing her to do stuff for him, like painting. Vera eventually realizes that Matthew has an extreme aversion to sex and women who flaunt their sexuality, probably due to the nuns treating Matthew with the standard Vatican sexist bad guilt-tripping treatment, and tries to use that to her advantage to throw Matthew off his game long enough to escape, but to her detriment finds that Matthew has more tricks up his sleeve, like horror movie villain teleportation perhaps. Originally titled The Captive Female but quickly changed to Scream Bloody Murder for its release, this unpleasantly misogynistic but nevertheless interesting early 1970s proto-slasher is one of those films that screams 1970s exploitation from the top of its lungs. It has all the flourishes of the era, except for nudity and gore. While the film has quite the body count, the gore is limited to blood spatter and nothing else, while the nudity only consists of Lee Mitchell's left side boob during a bath scene, which makes the film's RC status by the Australian OFLC something of a joke. Were the film to be resubmitted today, it would be most definitely MA15 plus and no higher. The film was made by the same company that made Sisters of Death, another early 1970s proto-slasher that was even more tame than this one. And while the misogyny on display here is quite alarming by today's standards, Matthew goes around fatally punishing any woman who has control of his sexuality, making him 1970s version of today's incel movement. Now for those who don't know, incel refers to a group of young men who simply cannot get laid to save their lives, sometimes due to their bad attitude towards women, and who spend their time ranting against women, blaming all their problems on the female sex. Some members of this toxic movement have even committed mass murders, and there's such an extremely toxic and dangerous person being here. But down to this very concept, the film is also somewhat interesting as we get to see the kind of damage that such a person is capable of if they're left to their own devices. If anything, this is a warning from history about the dangers of things like incels and feminists, a warning that has not been heeded given how both groups are causing massive trouble these days, not to mention the horrific bullying generated by the trans activists out there, a movement that puts both the incels and the feminists to shame. As for acting, the cast do a decent job. It's a cool thing to see the tall man himself, phantasm actor Angus Scrimm, do an early role here as a concerned doctor who very nearly stops Matthew, but fails to see a blunt object coming right towards his head. It might be a strange idea to have Matthew's mother and the hooker wannabe final girl played by the same actress, but that trick actually works in the film's favour, as we see why Matthew seems so intent on keeping her for himself, and we get to see an awesome bit of old lady crutch through ass kicking thrown in for good measure. So while this film ain't a particularly decent film by common standards, it does have a relevant topic which has got more relevant these days, and along with the decent acting makes this an average film of the C, 4 out of 10 rung on my grading ladder. Fans of 1970s exploitation will be right at home here. Now for gore and nudity. Very little gore, limited to blood spatter, and the only nudity is of Lee Mitchell's left breast, or at least the back of it when she takes off the top of it back to the camera. Apparently on the trailer you can also see a boom mic at the top of that scene, but only in the trailer. Now, if you want to track down a copy of this film, actually my print was from the Driving Classics box set from St. Clair Vision. Basically 9 drive-in films, and I'll review all the films in that set eventually, but I'm halfway through it. And it's got like a 5.1 audio track, which like a virtual 5.1. It's basically a mono track done 5.1 style, and a 4:3 frame. But the picture quality isn't perfect. It's pretty age-weary. The opening credits are kind of very hard to make out, and I mean, it looks like an old VHS, but uprated a bit. Anyway, but there are definitely prints out there worth getting if you're into this film. Okay, that's it for Scream Bloody Murder. I should point out that this film was reputed to be called the first film to be called a gornography. Kind of strange, but there's no blood in this, very little. I should point out that there was actually a longer version, uncut version, which actually had more graphic gore in it. The version we see today is pretty tame, but I wonder where you can get that uncut version. Anyway. Okay, that's it for that one. So Scream Bloody Murder gets a C, 4 out of 10. It's average. Interesting, but just strictly average. Now, I do not do requests, but if you have any questions about DVDs or films in general, just hit me up in the comment section. I'll be happy to answer. Hope you guys are staying safe. Take it easy, and that's it for this review. See ya.